it's to some extent, as I say, fed on itself.
Thank you. Simon Fell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us. Roger Goff, if I can look at the system that's in place at present, I'm curious to know how well the process is working for handling unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who first arrive in the UK. Obviously, a lot of agencies have to work together. Do you feel it's working as effectively as possible at the moment?
I think the initial stages of it have been a relatively smooth system. The problem has become how it copes with numbers. So what we had was, what has happened up until the changes that we made on the 17th of August, what happened was that young people would come into the Kent intake unit. They would be initially assessed by Border Force, often on a quite rapidly. This would be a matter very often of a few hours, seldom much more than that. And that we, as the local authority, would then, our social workers would go down to the port to collect those young people and take them into our care. We have a system of reception centres. It's worth saying, actually, at the beginning of this calendar year, we had one reception centre, but we have a system of reception centres into which those young people would come for a period probably about 6 weeks on average for a full age and needs assessment. So I think when the numbers were manageable, then it was actually a system that worked within its own terms pretty smoothly. And I'm not aware of any point at which it was felt that there were problems picking up the young people from the port. It seemed to work relatively smoothly. Clearly, once you move to a situation where you have 60, 80, 90 or more young people arriving in the course of a month, then it becomes a rather different equation.
Thank you. Can I ask where the particular strains are when you start to stretch those numbers and grow those numbers?
I think the strains for us come in really two forms. One was on our reception capacity. So, as I said, we started the year with one reception centre. We moved it out to 3 plus an annex. And I think what we first found, where the pressure was first felt, and I'm thinking now in the spring, was that with the impact of COVID, we found that it was often harder to secure some of the accommodation, usually supported semi-independent accommodation where these young people moved on to. So there tended to be a little bit more of a bottleneck, if you like, within the reception centres. In any case, there is a certain amount of time that process takes. So once your numbers start to really increase, then the pressures on the reception centres get more severe. It got a little more complicated again with COVID because we could move, for instance, in one of our reception centres to doubling up to young people in a room. That is clearly profoundly undesirable under current conditions. And once you moved into a situation of quarantine, essentially unworkable. So the pressures built on the reception centres. I think from our point of view as a local authority, there was a second issue, which was a much more long-term one, or both short and long-term, and that's around social worker capacity and indeed the other support services we provide. So, for example, our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children front door arrangements, the social workers who deal with them in the early stages around reception centres, they had caseloads which by August were heading up into the mid to higher 30s. The recommended level is 15. We may come to this later on. Numbers have reduced a bit, but you're still looking in the mid-20s at the moment. Clearly, there is a question as to how you sustain that longer term. Also, once those young people move into our wider children in care service, in which case you would again see pressure potentially on caseloads. So a big factor for us looking at it longer term was, what does this mean for the nature of our whole children's service and our capacity to provide a good service both to those young people arriving on our shores and indeed to others, whether they come from a US background or indeed are local citizen young people as well.
Thank you. Can I ask how much notice you get between a child arriving in Kent and going into your care?
It is tended to be fairly quick, but so I think when those young people arrive, we get the call and we're told that they're there, and in the course of, I think it may be sometimes a few hours, we collect them. Now, I don't think, again, when the numbers were manageable, that was particularly a problem. And I think it was a system that, as I say, worked reasonably smoothly. The bigger issue for us, I think, has simply been the significant numbers and what that's meant for our capacity to act effectively as an authority in this sort of area.
And what is your capacity for stepping up social workers?
Well, we have continued to hire new social workers, but that's also been part of our effort more generally to increase caseloads, to reduce caseloads, increase capacity and reduce caseloads across our entire service. But it's not something that can be, if you like, turned on and off like a tap. And now there are specific areas where we're getting support in relation to there's work going on at the moment with the Home Office in terms of a specific focus on age assessment. But that, again, it's worth mentioning, was a particular feature of the summer because there were more age-disputed cases coming to us from Border Force. And that, again, requires a quite intensive process involving a couple of experienced social workers over a period of certainly a number of weeks to carry that out. So, again, that's become, if you like, something of a bottleneck.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
And just to quickly follow up on that, and what about a specialist